Thank you for joining me on the continued Kundalini journey. The last thing I wrote in my journal before I was hospitalized was, "There are stars, humans accepting ego 100%, star quality. Then there are diamonds, who reflect the stars to themselves. Diamonds can reflect all to everyone." So the diamond way in Buddhism. "I calculate the meaning of things quickly and sloppily, like a scientist who thinks much faster than he writes." And that was the last thing I wrote before my best friend and my ex-boyfriend became so concerned for my safety that they admitted me to the hospital late one night. I do remember a few things that I did in front of other people, these two people in particular, that could have alarmed them. One thing was I broke a glass on the kitchen floor, and I was, again, channeling many different levels of experience at once. I walked over the glass several times without getting cut or hurt in any way, but the person that was in the room with me totally flipped out and had a panic attack after watching me do that and telling me I was going to hurt myself and stop. And, I would like to point out my feet did not get cut, and I was okay. I was exploring different levels of reality, and my body was compensating for it. The most interesting and potentially frightening experience I had during this particular time in June of '04 was I had a very close personal friend over, and it seems that they were taken over. That it seems that my spirit guide Hermes took over their body and told me some very important things in a very short amount of time, and drew symbols on my feet and hands and gave me some advice: always wear your shoes on your path. And this was after the walking over the glass, and it felt like a protection was being put upon me, and I also felt like an initiation from my guide. And when I looked into the person's eyes that was possibly possessed by Hermes, they were not that person's eyes at all. I saw shapes in them, pictures in them, and I knew that this was beyond normal human experience, or what I had known as normal human experience. So that was the deepest, most real experience I had during that time. The spirit inside the body told me to love myself and to be majorly focused on me. And I believe I did take that advice. I still can't explain what happened there. Obviously, I'm struggling for words. However, because we always think of possession as a negative thing, as a taboo, as unnatural, and against some great law. Yet, in that moment, I needed it, and Spirit came through for me. And so I feel blessed and still weirded out. But there's a lot more that has weirded me out over the years. But that was the first big break in reality for me. And the other person doesn't remember any of it. So the other person knows that they were there and we were talking and understands the situation, but has no recollection of what happened during this particular part where I was getting symbols drawn on me and being told very sacred things. As I was being driven to the hospital by my best friend and my ex-boyfriend, I had a sense of elation. I felt, okay, we're either going to the hospital or I'm going to my coronation with the Illuminati, because I'd been told in a vision that I was Illuminati. More on that later. And this was my coming out party. I had great anticipation for this coming out party, this graduation, this welcome to your new life. As we were approaching the hospital on foot, I began hearing machines. It sounded like, to me, the machinery work of the universe, very much like a train when the wheels are being rubbed by the arms, like that. And I could just hear it. It was very audible. It was everywhere, and it became louder at times than the people next to me. And I remember hearing it and sensing it and thinking, well, those are just the mechanics of the universe, of course. We went to sign me in, and the man that was doing the paperwork looked like the traitor in the Matrix, Cyrus, I believe. And I told him that, and he giggled. And he asked what the problem was, and I remember them saying my behavior was erratic and that they were afraid for my safety. And at that point, I was put into a holding room in the basement of the hospital with other people who were also suffering from something mental, or at least that's how the hospital would define it. So I'm an open psychic channel. I'm believing in God and Jesus and love and Buddha, all these, great and wonderful feelings of euphoria. And here I am, surrounded by people who I trust. And that was a problem for me. I didn't understand that A, I was crazy, and B, I was locked up with a bunch of other crazy people. I felt very innocent, very trusting. I guess that's how I would put it at this point. I felt extremely trusting. If you told me something, I was going to believe you. And that led to an incident. There was a man there shouting about Jesus and how great Jesus was and how Jesus was coming and saving us all. And I was like, wow, that man really knows what he's talking about. That's the state of mind I was in at the time. And so that man came to me and took me to the bathroom and shut the door and laid me down and laid on top of me. Some nurses tried to get into the bathroom. At that point, he yelled, "We are in here." And at that point, I started to struggle, and he let me up. So nothing actually happened in that situation except for, I suppose, a big warning of you cannot trust the people you're around right now. You are not in a safe environment. And I was not being watched. And so at that time is when the nurses asked me, are you going to go hard or are you going to go easy? And I just looked at them like, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, all right. And about 4 women grabbed me, jumped on me, and shot me up with some kind of tranquilizer, and then shut me in a room with the door locked. And at that point I started having visions, and that vision was, I was looking around the room and I saw writing in places it shouldn't be, like on the side of the fire alarm there were numbers. So again, a heightened sense of awareness. I could see all the details in the room that normal people wouldn't realize were there. And then the ceiling opened up for me, and I do understand that this was not a, oh my gosh, the ceiling's opening up, what's happening? It was a vision, and I understood it as a vision. And there stood 5 or 6 spirit guides, and one of them, female, reached out to me and said, "Hey, hello, how are you?" And I felt her alarm, and she said, "Do you want me to take over?" I was like, "Who are you?" And honestly, the answer I got was Dion Fortune, who was an occultist, an author, and a great woman of her time, a great trailblazer. And I looked at her defiantly and hung on to my flesh with every bit of instinct that I had. And I said, "No, I do not need your help. I will do this on my own." And I felt that she was asking if I would like her to walk in to my body so I could go upstairs, so to speak, where she was, where her awareness was, and we would trade awareness. And in that way, she could help me by taking over. And I felt that if I let her take over, all of my lessons would go out the window. All of my knowledge and what I was putting myself through, I didn't know why I was putting myself through it, but I knew it was my lesson and I had to do it. It was my mission. So I don't know if that was my ego, but it really feels like my soul. And my soul was saying, no, thank you very much. I must do this by myself. So back to the journal. On June 15th, 2004, I wrote, I'm writing this on a hospital bed in a mostly dark room. This is my second trip to the emergency psychiatric ward. Last week, around the beginning of the month, I lost myself big time. My writing was erratic. I see that now as I look back. And so we've already seen some of that writing here in the videos, in the last couple of videos, the insights. And when I started getting messy and sloppy and writing like a scientist, as I called it, I felt that I had, lost some kind of continuity, and I was no longer integrated as a psyche. I had to go back to the hospital because my meds, Risperdal, they had me on, were making me nuts, like panic attack, crawl out of my skin, nuts. And I believe they call that akathisia, where you are having seizures that on a small scale, seizures like you're being electrocuted, and on a small scale it didn't feel that way. So I had to go back to the hospital and get remedicated on something else. And I wrote that I was dealing with a lot of shame, fear, and paranoia. And that's normal when the Kundalini comes up because it is a volume button for your fears and anxieties. It will exaggerate your fear, bring it up to you so that you can cleanse it. And it's not pretty, it's not fun, it's very hellish, but you're aware of it and you're in it and you're doing it. My dreams are more like therapy sessions. I am told in my dreams that I am learning to be my own best friend, getting to know myself, my moods, likes and dislikes, etc. I had been severely codependent for so long that I had lost touch with a lot of who I was on the inside. I met with 3 doctor people today. I was told my new meds will not make me hyper crazy. Opposingly, they will make me a bit of a zombie. Serpent in the rainbow. I mentioned to him the Bodhisattva vow, Ganesh, Krishna, and some of the visions that I had been having. And the 3 men around the table all shut up and looked at each other. And then I was escorted out of the room. So it was very interesting that as soon as I brought up the spiritual aspect of my emergency, I was dismissed. I was then asked later to participate in a series of studies on drugs and how they interact with each other. If you do go to the hospital for these reasons, or for mental illness in general, I strongly suggest against getting into any medical trials. The drugs that make it to the market are filled with side effects. So imagine the drugs that aren't even on the market yet and the interactions between these drugs. They're experimenting. So you don't know that you're getting good care and that you're being nourished. What you do know is that you're being experimented on. The next day was the 16th of June, which in the tarot card 16 is the Tower. And at this point I began marking my days by tarot cards. And I made a prediction that I would get out by the end of the major arcana, which would be the 21st. On June 19th, which would be the Sun, according to the tarot cards, I wrote, still in the hospital. I met a woman. She looks like Elizabeth Taylor. We were talking about the spiritual aspect of our insanity together. And this is her story, and I thought it was really interesting because she was the only other person in the hospital that had a similar story. Her story was the used oracle, that she was a Mayan princess, and that there were men who were trying to push her over a cliff, and that's what brought her to the hospital, because they were trying to kill her. And I suppose because she was talking about being a Mayan princess and being kidnapped and being thrown off a cliff, that her family obviously believed that she was having a mental breakdown and it was time for her to be hospitalized. I didn't think she was crazy. I did understand that what she was telling me may have happened on a different level of reality. I go on to say that I'm not really afraid of hidden enemies. I've never been one to look for future disasters. However, a disaster averting oracle. So I thought about that for a while. You know, this woman, this psychic woman from the Mayan past, a princess no less, which more than likely she heard priestess and misinterpreted it as princess. However, a disaster averting oracle sounds nice. So at this point, I was not having a lot of experience with paranoia. However, I was exposed to it through this Mayan priestess. I did start feeling, as I looked back on my life, that there have been so many synchronicities that maybe there was a secret society involved in my life, shaping me, molding me, getting me jobs, getting me apartments even, and setting me up with friends. And in my heart of hearts, I honestly don't believe that that's true on a physical level. I do believe it is true on a spiritual level, and I believe that is true for all of us. We just have to have the eyes to see and the ears to hear it. And then on June 23rd, I wrote, I got out of the hospital on the 21st as I had predicted, the major arcanas. Yesterday was my first full day back. I honestly don't remember too much from that hospital trip, except for singing in my room alone and going to the smoking quarters and talking to the other people, but not much. I was not that far gone, and the drugs that they put me on made me sleepy after a while, and then they sent me home. My normal life resumed, so I was able to be channeling and be on this medication. In November, I stopped the medication because I felt that it had taken away my life. I had no drive to do anything. I was not being creative. I could still hear spirit, and I was still writing down and having visions. However, I didn't feel like life held as much purpose or meaning as it did before, and I believe I was getting depressed. So I stopped taking the medication, and I was told by a doctor soon after that that I was okay and that I did not have to take the medication. If you're thinking about committing yourself or a friend, think twice. Understand that love, care, and truly being there, truly spending time with someone who's going through psychosis or Kundalini is what we need. We need that special loving care, not to be locked up with a bunch of other people who are having problems, who are being cared for by other people who have problems as well. Doctors and hospitals are not healers. They diagnose, and then they give you something, they give you a pill to try to calm your symptoms. There's no curing going on. So please, think twice. Thank you for joining me for my first trip to the hospital. I hope that you're enjoying the Kundalini series. And I would like to give special thanks to Sean Blackwell, BiPolarOrWakingUp. He also has his own Ning network, Wake the Planet. If you are having any kind of issues dealing with Kundalini or bipolar, I do refer you to Sean Blackwell. Thank you, Sean. We love you. Blessed be, and namaste.